Hello and welcome to another Game Analyzer, where we dismantle your favorite, or in this case, not favorite game. Here we go. SNK vs. Capcom Chaos was a bundle of mixed reviews when it came out. It was criticized from gameplay to character selection. It was also criticized for its, and I quote, lackluster music and dull, colorless backgrounds. Reviewers claimed that the music and backgrounds just didn't fit with the game at all. This is mainly because it was being compared to its predecessor, Capcom vs. SNK 2. Looking back, it's easy to realize that SNK vs. Capcom Chaos is an entirely different monster than the Capcom vs. SNK series. Let's start with the lifeless backgrounds and eerie music. In fact, those are the most logical words that could be used to describe the game. SNK vs. Capcom Chaos is not like any other Versus series before it. It's not about fun and happy times. Rather, it's about dark and depressing times. SNK was in a dark place financially, so keep this in mind. Ultimately, the mood of the story that we see in Chaos is probably what was felt around the office, and the music and the backgrounds had to demonstrate that dark atmosphere. But now that the mood is set, let's dive into the gameplay, which I think plays a crucial part into the overall meaning to the game. Unless you're a freak, there's no real way that you're going to see the endings with every character. They're true endings anyway. This is because the game forces you to do very specific things to actually get your good ending. Otherwise, your character will just disappear and never be heard from again. These specific tasks are really hard to pull off. For a casual player, this ultimately forces you to master only one character. I believe it's SNK's way of creating a little bit of a bond between the character and the player. Now let's talk about the character roster, something people often complained about. I'm only going to talk about a few characters, mainly the ones people questioned but at the same time thought were pretty neat. Let's start with the reason Hugo is in the game and Zangief is not. If you compare the two, Hugo definitely has a dark side to him. Even in Third Strike, his stage was a bit creepy. If you look at Zangief, he's always been sort of comical, so for this game, I think Hugo made more sense. Now I know you can argue that Dan is comical and also has no dark side, but they obviously had to put Dan Hibiki in the game, because well, he's a parody of an SNK character made by Capcom. Another important character to the roster was Firebrand, a character that everyone was least expecting. Now, they could have just made another Akuma, but ever since X-Men vs. Street Fighter, Akuma has always been seen as the dominant Capcom character, so having him as the main Capcom boss would not have had the same effect. Having Firebrand and making him look as creepy as he does just adds that much more to the game's atmosphere. Also, he is a perfect representation of Hell to coincide with Athena's portrayal of Heaven. Since the last fighting levels are Heaven and Hell, we are already given which directions our beloved characters are going. One of the more easier aspects to get out of the game is the fact that most of the characters are dead. The ones that are not dead are the following: Tessa, Akuma, Mars People, Zero, Dimitri, and all of the Samurai Showdown characters. It is debatable whether Hugo is dead or not. These characters somehow have the power to either travel through time or travel through dimensions. As for the other characters, they are all in some kind of purgatory. This is shown by the bad ending, in which you get probably the first few times you play through the arcade mode. Your character is missing and is never seen from again. This fact will always remain true. The only way you can see where they go is if you beat the game doing the random tasks that SNK has put out. Once you successfully do so, you are either taken to Heaven or Hell, depending on which task you did. In Hell you fight Firebrand, and in Heaven you fight Athena, but no matter which one you end up defeating, a character Lord will come and say, "Someone like you doesn't belong here," and then he sends you away. If you take everything literal, you would just assume that he's sending you back to Earth, but once you look at all the characters' different endings, you'll start to see certain patterns. Let's start with the sunset background. The sunset background is seen in many endings, and at a glance you could think that it's just the place Lord drops them off. However, the pattern suggests that the sunset may actually be a representation of passing on to the afterlife. This is most prevalent within Kasumi's ending. Yeah, Kasumi is in the game. She is pleased with the way she honored Toto and is determined to find her father, which is whom she is looking for in her entire quest. As she disappears into the sunset, Toto is seen behind her with tears in his eyes saying, "You were magnificent. You have matured into a real fighter." What I infer from this is that Toto is letting her go, and Kasumi's idea of paradise, which is, like Ryu's, the journey rather than the overall goal. You can argue that Toto is crying because of how well a fighter she is, which would make sense because he can be silly, but let's look at another ending. Ken's ending is another that can be viewed in many ways. In his ending, Eliza immediately rushes towards him and gives him a big hug. Without stopping to ask where he's been or even how he's doing, she pulls him into the sunset in a rush so that Ken will not have time for questions. I think the main message that the game is portraying is a rather deep one. Let's go back to when Lord says, "Someone like you doesn't belong here." If you look at heaven and hell, you see what heaven and hell are supposed to look like. If the character goes to hell, he feels like he's filled the void in his life and should be punished. If the character goes to heaven, he feels like he's complete and is ready for paradise. Regardless of where the character goes, Lord lets you know that this isn't where you belong. The real paradise is doing the things that make you happy. In Guile's case, that's being with his family, something he never has time to do. In Ryu's, it's the journey of getting stronger. Chun-Li is a workaholic, and Vega has always wanted everyone to see his beauty, so he built a statue of himself. However, one has to realize that all of the things that they do in their endings are their own imagination or a mirage. This is why heaven is so empty, only consisting of Athena and Lord. Some needs are specific, like Vega's statue, while others are more broad, like Ryu's journey. Also, some are a memory, like Sagat's training in Thailand. So what does all this mean? The game is telling players, subtly, that in life there is paradise. Some people go through life preparing for their vision of paradise without realizing that they may have already found it. And as a result, they don't treasure it. I think most of the endings present this message in some way, though I will admit some endings kind of stray from the idea, such as Dan, Hugo, and debatably Mize. I've always kind of liked the angle the game was going for. Gameplay-wise, it was a little difficult to get used to, but once you stop picking charge characters, it's all good. Like mentioned before, it wasn't your traditional versus series fighting game. It contained a variety of depth within the setting of the game, and you can tell a lot of thought went into it. For this reason, I've always kind of appreciated it a bit more than Capcom vs. SNK 2, and I know I'm probably alone on that topic. Well, thanks for watching another episode. If you have any more interesting things to add, go ahead and leave it in the comments below. Also, if you want more episodes, then hit the subscribe button. If you like the music that was used in the video, you can listen to it without me talking over it in the links below. This is Game Analyzer, signing off.